because the life is a bad life. When it comes to families, it's a destructive life. And I've said this many times. I'm not glorifying it, but I'm also being honest. There were a lot of guys there that were okay. They were good guys. And the life was not every aspect of the life was not as terrible as some people might make you believe. That's my feeling on it. Some people are going to knock me for it. I get it. But I'm sorry, that's been my experience. So I want to read this article, very upsetting. Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end. As always, we give God all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving for that because He's God and He deserves it. So, I got to be happy about something. We're finally getting sunshine here in California consistently. I'm telling you, this has been the worst 6 months as far as the weather in Southern California that I've experienced since coming out here in '79. But it's picked up, it's good. For those of you who've seen me on Twitter yesterday and Instagram, a friend of mine just bought a Infiniti dealership. He has a number of dealerships in New Orleans, Mississippi. Bought one here in Southern California. Took my daughter there yesterday. She bought a new car. Very, very happy. If anybody wants an Infiniti, I'm going to send you to this place. You mention my name, I guarantee you, he'll make you an offer you can't refuse. You get the best deal of any dealership anywhere in the country. How's that? Now, that's a real declaration I'm making for all of you. But anyway, so that was yesterday. People, I got a glass of wine here because I'm going to talk about something today that's just so upsetting for me. It really is. And the reason for that is because, our criminal justice system, it has to be based on fairness, equal treatment under the law to everybody, no matter who you are, what you are. If we don't have a system like that in America, we're really in trouble. And if you're noticing what's going on here in these past couple of years, the whole defund the police movement, what's going on in cities because of that attitude, because of our progressive, lenient district attorneys, it's a mess. What's going on in LA? Do you know that have to lock toothpaste up now behind, locked doors, glass doors, because shoplifting is out of hand? People don't get prosecuted anymore. If you're an employee and you take a photo of somebody stealing something, you lose your job, you get fired. Crazy stuff. What's happening with Hunter Biden? Please, people, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter. This is our country. This is our system. A 5-year investigation ends up with a slap on the wrist for that violation, you or I, anybody would be in jail. No doubt about it. I know this system inside out and upside down. I've been indicted 7 times. I've been to trial 5. I did 8 years in prison. I've been to more parole hearings than you can count. I visited my father for 25 years, went through 3 trials. I understand the system. We're not getting equal treatment under the law. The stuff that's going on with Biden. And let me tell you something. Before people start throwing Trump at me, who's not the president right now. If Trump is guilty on what he was indicted for, he'll pay the price. If those classified documents, if he did something wrong with them, okay, he's going to pay the price. So let's not get into that. If you did something illegal, you deserve the consequences, period. That's it. But come on, we see what's going on. It's crazy. So this article I came across, it just got me because some of my friends were involved in this. And when I see what's going on today and I realize what happened to some people in my former life, and I'm sorry, look, people, let me tell you something. When I left the life, I didn't leave it because I was mad at anybody. I didn't leave it because I'm saying, oh, you know what, people did me wrong, or any other thing like that. I knew what I was getting involved in when I got into that life. I understood it. I agreed to it. I took an oath. I agreed to it. I left the life because I saw it destroy my family, my mother, my father, my brothers and sisters, and I didn't want it to destroy my own family. That was the bottom line. And later, of course, I became a person of Christ, but that was later on. That was afterwards. That was during my prison term. I just didn't want to destroy my family because the life is a bad life when it comes to families, it's a destructive life. And I've said this many times. I'm not glorifying it, but I'm also being honest. There were a lot of guys there that were okay. They were good guys. And the life was not as, every aspect of the life was not as terrible as some people might make you believe. That's my feeling on it. Some people are going to knock me for it. I get it. But I'm sorry, that's been my experience. So I want to read this article, very upsetting. Franzese wine, of course, that's what I drink. It's not the only wine I drink, but I drink it most of the time because it's good and I enjoy it and it calms me down. I was sick for a couple of days last week and this kind of calms me down. So that's what wine is all about. So I may take a few sips during our talk. But here's the title of this article. I'm going to read it and give you my perspective. Too many have died in federal prisons. In 1967, President Johnson's Commission on Organized Crime declared that organized crime must be wiped off the face of the earth at all costs. President Johnson. The cost has been great, but the biggest has been the loss of the integrity of our federal criminal justice system and its constitutional values. That's because the federal government has opted to not only prosecute so-called members of the mafia or Cosa Nostra, but to make sure that they die in jail. Not because of their crimes, but because the government is relentless in accomplishing those 1967 goals. Think of that. It's true. They don't only want to prosecute organized crime, they want them to die in jail. And let me ask you a question, and please, I know I'm going to get banged on this, but I'm telling you my true feelings. Do you think some guys in organized crime were worse than some of the things that are going on now on the street? There's people that have been arrested 17, 18, 19, 21 times that have been let out and go and do street crimes against people. Innocent people walking down the streets. We didn't do that. We did not do that. 98% of the time we not. There were exceptions. You know, I know you're going to bring up the Roy DeMayo, and you have every right to bring that an exception. Roy was a serial killer in my view. And if he wasn't a member of the mafia, he still would have been a serial killer. That was his mentality. Greg Scarpa, kind of the same way. There were a couple of guys like that. Not many, but a couple, yes, at least during my time. That I'll say. Suppose members of organized crime are not only investigated differently from other criminals, absolutely. Their trials are different and one-sided. Absolutely. I'll verify that. And the sentences they receive are often longer than they deserve, no doubt about it, with the result being that many so-called members of traditional organized crime die in prisons that are euphemistically called federal medical centers. The federal medical centers in prisons, you don't even want to, you know, when I was being released from prison, we had to go get an AIDS test. You have to get it, right? I'm being released on a Monday. Friday, I go in to see the doctor. He called himself a doctor. He looks at me right off the bat and says, "What do you want?" Now, I never visited the doctor. I wouldn't care if I was dying. I wouldn't go in there, right? That was just me, you know, because I heard so many stories and people that they're just not qualified, right? What do you want? I said, "Hey, I don't want anything. I was told to come here because I have to get an AIDS test before I'm released." When he heard that, he was happy. Like, you know, I didn't have to make him do any work or say anything. He gave me the test and I said, "Man, you know, it's the last you'll ever see of me, God willing." That was it. But that's the doctors there. To accomplish these goals, the government uses the Racketeer Influenced Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, and what I call the rat system of justice. Now, I'm not writing this article. Remember that. I'm reading the article. This is what the guy said, and I agree with 98% of what's in this article. The RICO Act enables federal prosecutors to bring defendants to trial, not one case at a time, which is traditional law in all 50 states. RICO allows them to combine numerous crimes which often have no connection to each other and group numerous defendants together, even though they may not even know each other, into one racketeering indictment. When I was indicted by Rudy Giuliani, there was 16 of us. I had 15 co-defendants. 8 of them, I didn't know who they were. Never met them. Never seen them before in my life. They were in the same indictment with me. That's a racketeering indictment. They don't do that in any of the 50 states. But under the federal RICO Act, you can do that. You're on trial with people you don't even know, never seen, never had anything to do with. That's the RICO law. It's no secret to Gangland News, that's where I got this article. It's no secret to Gangland readers that the deck is stacked in the government's favor in RICO cases, without a doubt. Prosecutors arrange that by alleging that the defendants belong to a group, a crime family, that is a criminal enterprise. While it's not a crime to belong to any organization, the RICO law eases the rules of evidence for the government so much that virtually anyone can be established to be an affiliate of a criminal enterprise that the conviction rate in these cases is over 96%. What shot do you have? Over 96%. Do you know when I was acquitted in that case, it was like, wow. I mean, 8 got convicted, 7 were acquitted, something like that, but it was amazing, you know, that there was an acquittal in that case, because we thought we were in trouble, honestly, all of us. But, you know, the jury didn't buy it. That was it. If that weren't bad enough, judges are allowed to sentence these defendants not only based on, I want you to listen to this, judges are allowed to sentence these defendants not only based upon their convictions, but also for what they have been acquitted of at a trial, if the judge believes they were guilty. So listen to this. A defendant in a RICO case gets convicted, right? And at sentencing, the judge is allowed to consider other behavior in a trial where the person was acquitted, found not guilty by a jury. But the judge may say, well, I don't believe what that jury said. I'm going to consider this in sentencing you now. Something that they were acquitted of. A jury of their peers acquitted them. Judge says, no, I think you were guilty, so I'm going to sentence you and consider that based upon the fact that I think you were guilty, even though the jury found you innocent. What is that? That's our system of justice? And they only use this against organized crime. Nobody else. Nobody else. Gangland has written about a couple of them. The cases of Edmund Eddie Boyle and Frank Guerra come to mind. These were 2 guys where they were sentenced based upon something they were acquitted of before. Prosecutors can also ask the judge to consider crimes the defendant has not even been charged with, but only suspected of by the government. Are you listening to this, people? You haven't been charged with the crime, but the government says, I think that he's involved in this crime, and the judge can consider that in sentencing under the RICO law. That's it. Because these tactics are used primarily against Italian Americans or their friends, no one seems to care. No second chances for them, and virtually no compassionate releases. People, this is not fair in this country. You know, I'm going to tell you something. The government has so many tools and so many weapons in their artillery. If they can't get somebody the right way, then they shouldn't. The burden of proof is on the government. In this country, we are innocent until proven guilty. People knock me for saying that about Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate is innocent until proven guilty, no matter what. That's how it should be across the board. That's our system. That's the standard here. And yet, you're going to be sentenced on crimes you didn't commit, on crimes that you were acquitted of, and they can consider that in sentencing because you're alleged to be a member of organized crime? Not fair. His quote, the rat system is the pattern of the government flipping arrested targets and giving them absolution for all their crimes, including murder, as long as that they can be good witnesses for the government. Their lack of credibility is of no consequence, and the courts ignore all evidence which is adverse to the government when it comes to organized crime cases. That's true. The government don't care if you're lying. As long as you can prove their case and you're not caught in the lie, they're going along with you. Murder, no problem. Yeah, you're the worst person in the world, no problem. Help us, we'll absolve you of all of that, okay? We'll set you free, we'll give you some money, we'll put you in a program, we'll do all of that, as long as you help us out, because we have bigger fish to fry in their minds. That's the system now. I'm not being biased here. I want to ask you, sitting there, do you think it was fair? If this would happen to one of your relatives, to you sitting there, do you think something like this is fair? Do you think a judge should be able to consider crimes that you were acquitted of? Do you think the judge should be critical crimes you weren't even charged with, but the government suspects you of doing? That's not our system. That's not constitutional. All the lawyers believe that this RICO law is unconstitutional, but there's nothing they can do about it. John Gotti, Vito Genovese, Vincent Gigante, Anthony Salerno, Salvatore Lombardi, Peter Gotti, and so many other so-called gangsters have died in jail. Yeah, because why? Their sentences, 100 years, 150 years, triple life. Or you're going to say, well, they're murderers. Yeah, well, you know what? I get it. I understand that. But you know what? People on the street don't get these same sentences. People doing some horrible things, they don't get treated the same way. They die in jail, these people. The government would say it was their own fault. I say that some were over-sentenced, and all of them were targeted, grew old and sick, and left by the government to die in jail on purpose. I believe that. The case like this, which is closest to me, is that of Carmine Jr. Persico, my boss. 5 years was spent by my co-counsel, Anthony DiPietro, first proving that the government deliberately withheld evidence pointing to Carmine's innocence that could have been used by him at trial to debunk the commission case. Says that they held back evidence. Government does this all the time. Don't think that this is something new. In organized crime cases, they do it all the time. Their own paperwork, so-called FBI 302s, were deliberately hidden for 30 years. Judge Kevin Duffy denied the motion for a resentencing from 100 years to 32 years. He didn't even address the issue that was raised. Instead, he referred to his pre-sentence report from 1985 that had been debunked, disproven. Judge didn't even want to hear it. If judge doesn't want to hear the evidence, they just don't hear it. Now, this evidence was withheld against Persico. He got sentenced in the commission trial to 100 years. He did 32. He was old and sick. They tried to get him a compassionate release. It was denied. And the evidence was there to at least give him a sentence reduction. Wouldn't do it because they wanted him to die in jail. Our next shocking disappointment was the motion for mandatory parole after 30 years that DiPietro and I filed for Carmine after he had been in prison for 32 years. Now, he died in 2019, in prison. When we appeared for the hearing on August 2nd, 2017, the hearing officer, with hands shaking, read from a paper that stated the U.S. Parole Commission was adjourning Carmine's mandatory 30-year parole hearing until 2051, when Carmine would have served 66 years in prison and have been 118 years old. That's when they delayed the parole hearing for. In other words, they told him, you're dying in jail. No compassionate release, no nothing. 32 years, don't matter. You're an old man, die in jail. That's what they do with us. The most frightening thing is that what they did was legal under the law. That's the law. Carmine was sentenced by Judge Richard Owen to 5 consecutive 20-year prison terms for bid rigging in 1987. Bid rigging. You get 100 years for bid rigging. People get less than that for heinous crimes that they're pulling on the street. They don't even get bail today. They don't even get bail. No doubt with an insight into the future and to secure the government's desire for Carmine to die in jail, which is exactly what happened. But the government wasn't finished with him yet. When Carmine became terminally ill, we fought for months for compassionate release, which clearly should have been granted under the First Step Act of 2018. The COVID Act, where they let so many people out. But there are no chances at all for guys like Carmine Persico from the beginning to the end. They jerked us around endlessly until Carmine was so sick, we gave up on him dying at home and just begged that he be sent to Duke University Hospital, just down the road from his prison cell. Needless to say, Carmine Persico didn't make it home. He did spend his final days in the prison ward, chained to his bed at Duke University Hospital. It seems his file was marked that he must die in jail. I'm telling you. And here's a guy, Persico, that was very upset with me, contract on my life when I walked away, but we did get along during our time. And you know what? I feel for him because I have compassion. I knew the guy. 32 years in prison, he's dying, he's terminally ill. They let so many people out under the CARES Act, they wouldn't let him out because they want mob guys to die in jail. Like Carmine, there are many inmates who have been sentenced to life without parole who will likely die in jail unless the system changes and their situations are fairly reviewed. Some, like Johnny Papa, who is 47 years old and has served more than half his life in jail, deserves a second chance because of the person he has become. He's intelligent now, self-educated, has conducted himself as more than a model prisoner for 25 years. Should not our laws allow him to be considered for release someday? Changes in the law must be made. Others like Vittorio Vicamuso, 88, Jimmy Coonan, Westies, a guy I knew well, he's 75, Louis Bobby Maniac, 91, and James, the little guy Ida, 82, have all served approximately 30 years and are severely ill, every one of these men. Yet no matter how the law now encourages compassionate release, these men are ignored by the courts and the Federal Bureau of Prisons. They want to let everybody out on the streets. They're trying to abolish prison time for guys that are committing street crimes, beating up old ladies in the street, stabbing people in the street. They practically get no bail and they don't want them to do any prison time. But these people, after serving 30, 40 years in prison and being terminally ill, they want them to die there. Others like Vincent Vinny Gorgeous Baciano, who has served almost 19 years in prison, most of them in solitary confinement, are routinely denied any relief by the government-dominated justice system that seems dominated by angry ex-prosecutors. It seems that the government has slated these people to die in jail. Our laws, how these people are being treated, must be changed. And this was written by Matthew J. Mary, who's been a criminal defense lawyer for 45 years and a radio talk show host on WVOX 1460 AM for 8 years. People, look, I am not an apologist for the mob. I walked away from that life. I have stated many, many times that it's a bad life. I've even said it's an evil life because it's destructive to families. And some of the guys, just like I said, you get a Roy DeMayo, if he wasn't in the mob, he would have been the same kind of guy. The mob did not do that to him. And some of these guys that have a penchant for violence, they would have been that way anyway. And again, I'm not saying that, I'm not justifying the things that we've done. But there is a point in time when you realize that the law is not just for these guys. It's not. I mean, he got that sentence, Junior, for bid rigging. Bid rigging. That's it. It's a financial crime, basically. You spend the rest of your life in prison. Oh, well, he's a member of organized crime. Oh, well, we got him for the things that he didn't do. Well, that's not our system. You don't sentence people because the government thinks you might have done something. You don't sentence people after they've been acquitted for a crime that they went to trial for and a jury acquitted them for. This only happens in our life. And again, crime is running rampant today. Do you see what's going on in LA, in New York, Chicago, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Los Angeles? Crime is out of control. And don't let the progressives tell you any different. It's not true. So why are they being so soft on this? What's the agenda? What's the motive behind this? Think about it. Why are they letting criminals come into this country, over our southern border? Now, you say, well, Michael, they're not criminals. Oh, yes, they are. I've spoken to Border Patrol agents from the state of Texas. A lot of these gotaways are criminal. They don't know who they are. They don't know where they came from. They have no paper on them. They have no ID on them. And they're coming into our communities. Why is this happening? What is the real story? What's the agenda? What's going on in America? Organized crime is not the main problem here. Why are they letting fentanyl come across the border? Do you know that over 100,000 people a year, Robert De Niro, his grandson, died of an overdose of opioids that he probably didn't know were laced with fentanyl. Probably didn't know that. It's coming in over the southern border. Can I ask you a question? I'm going to get hit for this, but I want to ask you something. If you were president, and if somebody you knew were president, okay, and knew that drugs were coming in over the southern border in record numbers, what would you think of that person? If that person knew it, and he does, our president knows that, and he's allowing it to happen because we have open borders. Don't believe it's open borders. We all know that, okay? They can't keep pulling the wool over our eyes. We have open borders, and drugs are pouring in. If you know that's happening, and you're in control of this country, are you worse than organized crime guy? We didn't do that. I'm sorry, we did not do that. We didn't attack young kids. We didn't do that. What's going on? What's the agenda here? Something has to be done, people. I'm telling you. So, again, I'm not being an apologist. I'm just trying to be fair. We got to have some compassion in life and some justice for the other people. The scale has to be balanced. And what's going on in this country now, I am telling you this, we are in severe trouble here. If something doesn't change, we are not going to notice this country in 3, 4, 5 years from now. That's soon. It's happening. It's happening pretty quick. There's an old thing, somebody mentioned, I think it was Patrick Bet-David. If you put a frog in boiling water, he immediately jumps out because it's hot, right? If you put him in warm water that slowly starts to boil, the frog will die because they don't realize it's boiling. Well, that's what's happening here in America. Things are slowly happening that some people are not paying attention to. Why? Mainstream media doesn't want to talk about it. You don't know where you get your news. You don't know what's happening. Okay, but some of you are not living in cities where crime is out of control, but it's happening in this country, and all of a sudden, boom, just like that frog. You're caught up in it, and you can't do anything to reverse it. We got a problem here, people. We got to put the right people in office. Doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, Democrat, whatever. People that care about this country and care about its people. That's it. I'm going to take one more sip of this because I need it. That's it for today, people. So, hope you not enjoyed it. I hope you just become aware of these things, you know? That's it. How do I always leave you? Same way. Be safe. Again, it's all about being safe. Be healthy. God bless each and every one of you. I mean that. Yes, I'll see you next time.